Well, hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Safeonomics. I'm Scott Cuthbert, co-founder of Safeopedia, and it's my absolute pleasure today to be speaking with Jen Long. I would assume most of you know Jen. She's been doing this for quite some time, but going to talk about two really interesting topics today with accountability and psychological safety. And Jen, why don't you give everyone a quick background and then we'll jump into the questions.
Quick background. Okay. I have been doing training development and coaching for uh around going up on 30 years now, and accountability has been the bread and butter of what we do. So I've been neck deep in how to have a better conversation and build a better relationship and do accountability differently than it's been done. And it's my continued mission to make it less punitive and more about learning and improving, such that everybody in the safety community can look at accountability through a learning and improving lens instead of finding and a blaming lens, and doing that just in regular corporate everything every day: better relationships, better work, better productivity.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today because accountability is one of those words that gets thrown out an awful lot, and
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of assumptions as to what it means and how it should be framed within an organization. But I think a lot of organizations are probably not quite getting it right. So I'm really excited to jump into that. But you talked about, on the safety side, the psychological safety, you know, organizations have spent years and real money in investing in psychological safety, yet there's critical information still goes unspoken, even when people report that they feel safe, right? So what's the difference between knowing it's okay to speak up and being prepared to speak up in the moment?
So this is kind of the difference between psychological safety and what I would say is more of a psychological readiness. And psychological safety is really good at creating condition, right? What is the condition we need to operate in such that when we speak up, we can feel free to do so and there will be no retribution, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't always guarantee that somebody's going to stop work in the moment, that they're going to tell tell the CEO to put on their PPE, right? There's that moment where we weigh the risk, and this is the interpersonal risk. And so you really got to think about psychological safety about measuring my interpersonal risk in the moment. And so that's where readiness makes a difference. Well, readiness is a capability, whereas psychological safety is a condition. And so part of the work that I do is, if you're going to do readiness, readiness is all about practice. It's all about, how do I say, what do I say, can I say it, that kind of thing. What are the conditions that this kind of work is done in? What am I going to meet? What can be expected? So that when it comes up, my muscle memory is there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great answer. I know my son's 21 in the workforce, and a lot of times he'll come home and he'll say, I wish I would have said this or I wish I would have said that. And I say, well, okay, now so practice and think about it and so that you're prepared, not just
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Coulda, woulda,
feeling like
shoulda.
it's okay to speak up, but then missing that opportunity, right? So I think that's a really important point. What are the most, common barriers you see? Is it fear? Is it this something more mundane, like people not having the words in the moment, or waiting for someone else maybe to speak up rather than that person taking the lead or the responsibility?
Right. And this is an interesting kind of question, because I think the real question, as opposed to what barriers are there, is what makes it easier to stay silent, and kind of thinking through what's going on within that kind of work, the organization, et cetera, that actually makes staying silent the risk the risk they want to take, right? It's easier to be quiet than it is to actually speak up. And so There are a bunch of reasons, right? So the first one might be clarity. Am I clear? Is this really wrong? Do I know enough about the work to be able to say something, right? Is there a higher expertise around me that I don't feel qualified to say something? Um, there's social risk, right? So this is about, am I going to damage a relationship? Will this person be defensive? Will altercations ensue? Will I create conflict? Will they stop trusting me if I speak up? Um, Another one is power imbalance, right? So if I'm the junior on the team, right? What kind of an impact is that? Am I going to look to my side to see what's right when I know what's right? Because I don't feel like I have the reputation or someone else in the environment has more experience, right? So I'm going to look at that differently. A fourth one is identity protection. What if I'm wrong? No one wants to look like an idiot, right?
Right.
So I don't want to be perceived as incompetent or difficult or uninformed or any of those things. So that feels like more of a risk than being quiet. Um, the outcome, uncertainty or apathy. Like, what if I say something and nothing happens? Right? Nothing changes. Everybody's like, nah. Um, and so then I ask myself, why do I want to create friction? Because nothing's going to happen. Um, do I have a skill deficit? And so this is a lot of work that we do in the labs, which is really around, do I know how to say it, what to say, how I could frame it, right? So that it's easy and I'm not stumbling and I'm not looking for words and I'm not looking for how do I put this on the table in a way that doesn't make people defensive, right? So the skill thing is an important part if I don't feel I'm capable. Um, Cognitive load is an interesting one, right? Am I so focused on task that this right goes to situational awareness a little bit about that I'm not back far enough to really look. I'm just down and in, and it's easier to stay focused on that than take all the extra peripheral information in at the same time. And then a big one is organizational conditioning, right? What is the culture of the business, right? Is there a just this is how we do it? Just this is how we do
Right.
it, right? And a big one, I think, and the last one on my list is competing commitments. Is it easier to stay quiet? I've got competing commitments, and this always go to the big one is always productivity over safety. Got to
Right.
get it done, right?
Yeah.
And so I think those are not so much the barriers, but the reasons that it's easier to stay silent.
Yeah, those are definitely some good ones to think about.
Yeah.
I think everybody is, well, I would assume most people have been in one or more of those sort of situations or positions themselves. So you can definitely appreciate how that can happen, regardless of how kind of safe you want to create, the environment to speak up. So definitely a
Exactly.
lot of things to consider. Accountability, it's a loaded word, kind of like we mentioned at the beginning. In safety for a lot of workers, it means blame or that incident review after something goes wrong. You define it. You mentioned clarity and having each other's back. How do you get a workforce to believe that reframe, especially if someone has maybe been burnt in the past with speaking up and having some negative consequences?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice idea, but that's not really what's going to happen, is it?
Yeah,
And it's getting people to change their belief about something is always a very, very difficult thing, right? And beliefs are what people hold to be true. And so I'm never going to go into an organization and say, all right, we're going to change beliefs. There are people who already believe it. And when they hear this is about learning and improving instead of this is about punitive measures, there's this relief of exactly, exactly. And so it's finding and it's a strategy around tipping point. It's around where are the people that are willing, where are the groups that already, where are the leaders that are already on board with that idea? And then what are you doing to leverage momentum and grow it strategically that way? Because you're never going to come in and it's as they gain momentum, are they good? Is it a good story? Does it gain traction in the organization? And how do you move that through strategically?
yeah. So getting tactical on that, and I think you're sort of touching on it, but what's one conversation tool from the lab that a safety director could bring to their team, at the next meeting to start introducing this framework?
So if they're going to introduce it, first they got to introduce the idea about we're going to think about it differently, right? We're going to use accountability to have each other's back. We're going to use accountability to learn and improve. We're going to live in the hot principles. And there's a tight affiliation between those guiding principles are there because they should be guiding your conversations regardless of the amount of outside pressure that you have, right? So it starts with a reaffirming if we're going to operate under these principles, that means when we hold each other accountable, how we look at accountability is going to fall into those principles. And so understanding that a tactic that when I work with groups is as part of the brief, you're going to start asking the question of the people you're about to do the work with is what are you going to do to have my back? And it's a broad question and it's personalized to everybody on the team. What are you going to do to have my back? It's not just what role do you have in this process? What are you doing as part of the work? What's your role on this? It's in addition to that, what are you going to do to have my back, my back, my back? And we're going to talk about that because what that does is it creates interpersonal understanding and individual commitment at kind of a broader level. It's not just a fidelity to the process, the method, the steps. It's fidelity to the people in the group. And when you have that conversation as part of your brief, you start to look at your team a little bit differently.
Right.
And it opens a broader spectrum to I'm going to be looking at a lot of things, right? Not just are we following the steps?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And maybe a little bit of excuse me, a little bit of overlap with this question, but a lot of the people that attend Safety Connect or use Safeopedia as a resource are working for those mid-sized organizations, a couple hundred employees or less, and there might be two or three safety professionals in the safety department. And so how do there's no corporate learning department,
Mhm.
training department maybe. Where do they get started and how do they practice this? You can't wait until there's a near miss to start. You
Right.
wanna get ahead of this. So how would you suggest those smaller safety teams without maybe the corporate structure, to kind of get started?
Well, this is where, so I've started using the word lab to work accountability in a lab environment because accountability is practiced contextually and it's adaptive because not every environment, like it should be relative to the work and the people who are doing the work. It's not a process that you just implement. It's not a step by step. Here's a thing. I mean, I can give you steps to how to do a conversation and all that kind of stuff. But I think when you're looking at how might I get started on this, pick a group that's struggling with safety. Hold a lab. Let's talk about how we think about it. Let's talk about how we're trying to change it. We sort of have that, what can we do to teach ourselves to think about it differently and to practice it differently? And if you've got buy-in in the lab, then the labs are really designed to be sort of an opportunity to take stock of where do we struggle and how do we innovate through that? And what can we apply? And if we started to do this practice of, what are you going to do to have my back in this work? How does that impact what's going on? And how do we want to measure this one group? And so I would say do targeted experiments, right? This is why we call them labs.
Right,
Work with the group, right? And so when people are like, not only what are you going to do to have my back, but what can I do to make it easier for you to say something so
right,
that the responsibility is mutual and start with those sorts of things and do the learning and improving. When you do the after action review or when you do the debrief of the whole thing, how'd that go? How'd that work, right? And what other things might we try relative to how do we talk to each other? Because accountability is all communication,
yeah,
right? The quality of our communication and our willingness. Were you ready? Well, I said this. it made me really nervous, but here it worked or whatever. But that sort of understanding of, and the labs are really kind of designed to work in real time. And so safety people are really good if they're going to run an experiment, be there for the work, be there for the pre-brief, be there for the debrief, see what works. And that's how I would tell you to do it.
Yeah. Well, I love that approach as well. And so just, maybe if there's people out there listening and they're, working for an organization that might be a little bit more traditional or old school in their view of accountability, um, what kind of words of encouragement would you give them? Like, what kind of transformation have you seen when organizations start using some of these methodologies to open up that conversation? Like, I can just imagine, the room of grizzled workers when it's like, let's talk about what you're going to do to have each other's back. That could kind of go a couple of different ways. How have you seen that go once you start opening up those conversations?
Well, you can get some salty people who've been there a long time who've lived through a lot of these organizational, what is this flavor of the month thing we're doing now? And we've had
Right.
people here before and this and that and the other. And the things to be aware of are when people don't buy in, call it out, right? If you're unwilling, how's that impact our ability to get safer? If you're unwilling, right? And part of that too is some people will just play along. They will be performative in their, "Oh, what are you going to do to have my back?"
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work. And we can sense this in conversation. We can sense this if people are inauthentic, playing along, just going, all right, then I'll jump through your hoop. This isn't gonna work, right? That's when you have to look at those people and go, now you're the accountability problem, right? You're moving the accountability problem from fidelity to something else to your lack of buy-in is also a problem. And that creates a problem around accountability as well. And so I think there's a combination of call it out when you don't think people are, and I think this is always the hard part, like, oh God, oh, that's going to be so uncomfortable. But that's where safety people have to get comfortable with them being uncomfortable to say, right, we're putting this in. We believe this is going to work. We want to run an authentic experience. And if that's how you're showing up, you're going to be the problem.
Right.
And you're going to be the reason. And is that the guy you want to be? And sometimes that'll just stop them cold and be like, oh, okay, well, no, that's not exactly what I want it to be.
Yeah.
But it requires trusting conversations. It requires transparency. It requires you to, if I'm going to bring you in, tell me why you're unwilling. And sometimes the question is, what are you afraid of? Well, it's easier to do this and I feel like I'm going to look stupid. It's the same list of why it's easier to stay silent. I'm protecting my ego. I don't want to be vulnerable. This seems soft. I'm judging this in a way. And you have to call them on you're judging it having never experienced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some good advice. So transitioning over to frontline supervisors, they play a big part in this, right? Making this stick. And what's the biggest mistake that you see organizations make, or biggest misstep when they're trying to roll this out to the front lines?
Yeah. Same, right? It's going to be the
Yeah.
same kind of performative, false buy-in. I'll say yes, yes, nod my head. And then when I get out into the field, I'm just going to revert back to where my comfort is, what I know.
Yeah.
And that's where in the lab, play that out. Rehearse
Right.
that. You get out there and your teammate Tony's going to act like this. What are you going to do? And if just one of you on the team calls him out and the rest of you are with Tony, you guys are back to square one,
Right.
right? And so that's the whole point of the lab is to explore the dynamic in the room, to explore the dynamic of the team, to explore the dynamic of the conversation, because that's the thing that's got to shift,
Yeah.
right? It's the communication shift in real time. And so the labs are designed to say, how are you guys with each other? What does that look like? Right? Okay, new guy. tell us what your experience is. Okay, veteran guy, tell us how you're thinking about that. And that whole conversation creates mutual understanding, mutual commitment of here's what we're going to try. Here's what we're going to do different. And then how'd that make
Yeah.
you feel? How'd that work? How'd that
Right.
go? What
Get a
would we
little
do? What
buy-in.
would we tweak? Right. And
Yeah.
I think most people are surprised because it creates a tighter understanding. It creates a tighter commitment between people and a level of awareness around how we do what we do together
Right.
that we currently don't have because relationship building seems so soft.
Right. Yeah.
But you guys are not successful individually, you're successful together.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I can imagine there's a lot of workers, frontline staff who haven't been asked in the past, to for their ideas or their suggestions on what they should do to be safer, to have each other's back. So it might take a little while to get everybody warmed up and sharing.
Well, right. And nobody expressly states organizationally, your boss doesn't say, as part of your performance review, I need you to have positive, trusting working relationships with absolutely everybody you work with.
Yeah.
No one says that. We all assume that coming in the door that we're all going to work together. But a
Right.
lot of gaps come in because of the gap in the relationship, the gap in connection. And conversation is connection. And are we connected to each other such that we can say the things we need to say when it matters most?
Right. So one of the things I like to kind of ask and get on the table, somebody's listening in, maybe they're director, VP level, and they're thinking, how do I know if this is working, right? Like I want to support it and I want my organization to buy in, but what leading indicators tell you a team is getting more ready, and how does that connect to the outcomes, leaders care about, like near miss reporting, quality, and operational resilience, and are they going to see it on the bottom line as well?
Yeah, yeah. And the metric thing is like the lab thing. What is a leading indicator for this kind of work? What is a leading indicator? Um, and so I would say this is always, and I don't want it to sound like a cop-out answer, but it's very much group dependent, work dependent. Like what would tell you it's working? Besides the understanding the dynamic of the group, right? And so a tool that I use to understand the dynamic of a team is I'm currently messing with a survey called the 5 Cs, which looks at it's a diagnostic of a team environment. Do we have psychological safety? Do we have trust? Do we recognize contribution? Do we do all these things? Because if we don't have trust, that being the formative one, everything spirals from there. And that's a survey that it's like a 6-minute survey. It gives you a team understanding and it gives you a place to identify where team leads are not picking up the ball or where they could actually do some better work in communication and candor and that kind of thing. And then you can retake it as many times as you want to see if you've got progress. And so that's a team diagnostic for a dynamic of how they work together. And you can add that into whatever actual work metric you're trying to solve. And I think those are going to be indicative of if we've got safety issues here, how do we know? What are those metrics and what do those really need to look like?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's probably a difficult answer, and
it
depending
is.
size and
It is.
industry, and all those different
It's what
factors.
makes,
Yeah,
what's going to tell you it's changing, that's not lagging. What's going to lead in that's going to be an indicator. Yeah.
yeah. And just ask about, like, are they going to see it in the quality reporting or the operational resilience? Like, do
Mhm.
you do you see those sorts of things? Do you get to stick around long enough with organizations, or do you get to come back and see how
I
they're?
haven't yet. I haven't
Yeah,
been doing it long enough in this framework to really say, here's the success story I can share with you because
yeah,
this is the hop gang has only picked up on accountability in the last couple of years, and some
yeah,
people have just done let's introduce this idea to people, but nobody's really been like, oh, let's go full on in on this accountability thing. So it's just kind of getting momentum now because people are starting to understand the weight of it and accountability. You talked at the beginning, safety people versus the smaller ones who don't have learning and development, and they kind of work together because these accountability skills are interpersonal skills and they translate to all your leadership, all your relationships. It's just one of those skills that once you get it, it works everywhere.
Right.
And so it's not really seen, safety's kind of like, is that something we invest in or is that something learning and development invests in? I think it's finding its place. And the labs are designed to really just work with the safety people to say, okay, what kind of impact can we have if we're just doing this from this angle that
Hmm.
they can self-drive and take off from.
Yeah. One of the, and taking a slight deviation from the topic, but one of the questions that we get a lot or discussions that happen are, how do safety people advance within an organization? Because
Mm.
safety is, relatively new compared to, some of the other, operations or finance or sales, in organizations. And there isn't a clear path necessarily from, you know, s- a senior manager or supervisor of safety to the C-suite. And again, might be too early in your journey to answer the question, but I can only imagine that implementing this, asking questions, having these dialogues, it's really going to demonstrate your leadership abilities as a safety professional, and it's got to help. You get a bigger voice, more influence within the organization, and definitely being recognized for more senior roles as well. Have you seen any of those
Absolutely.
impacts?
Um, the impacts I see are the people who understand how to ride the internal network, right? How do you build, if you're looking to, if you've got ambition around this, and you want to get into the C-suite, where's your champion currently? Where are the director level, vice president level people who already share this perspective, share this belief, who can get behind you, who will, if your facilities vice president is the person who's running safely, are they really your champion? And if you sat down and really talked to them philosophically around what the hop investment is, what that shift in thinking is doing for the business. And so it's a combination, I think, of being able to find the key champions in key areas of the business. It's not just facilities, maybe it's your shop people, maybe it's, you know, somebody at the COO level, which would be awesome. And then can you talk business case? Can you demonstrate impact? Can you, as you do a lab or an experiment, say, here was the hypothesis, here's what we did, here was the problem we went to go solve, here's what we did, and here's the impact of that to the bottom line,
Yeah,
to productivity, to performance, right? And how did you measure that? And being able to make that case back
yeah,
because that's and to do it at the executive summary level because that's what they are interested in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We've lots of our guests have mentioned, take take the CFO or the controller out for lunch and learn about the language they're speaking and what's important to them. Same on the operations side, so that when
Mhm.
you are pulling that case study together, you can present it in the language of the organization, not safety. We get going with our acronyms and sometimes forget the rest of the world has
Well,
their own set of
exactly.
acronyms, and we need to be able to be bilingual in those in order to communicate within the organization.
Right. Right. And make friends with your organizational law department because they're the ones who understand the real cost of a lack of safety, right? What the financial impacts are. And
Yeah,
that's a huge when you go to make a business case of here's the savings we just created because it's a cost savings as well as a productivity boost.
right.
Yeah.
Have you seen, just curious, if you've seen any overlap with the HR human resources folks and the safety folks when it comes to implementing this type of framework within an organization?
Yeah, because HR There's overlap into leadership development. There's overlap into, right, what are we doing to instill this as a performance standard? And how do we standardize that across the organization? So while I say it's very adaptive and contextual, it is, but is it also understood as this is how we think about it? When we do learning and improving, we don't do shaming and blaming. And HR has to be on board with that as well, because then you can double down on how you can resource it, how they can back you up where they need to back you up, right? Do we need to do a half day and run a learning around a group of supervisors or whatever that might be to help momentum and
Right.
scale? Yeah,
Yeah.
you definitely want partners.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if a listener, and we'll encourage them to come back and re-listen, if they miss some of the points. But if a listener's just remembering one thing from our conversation today, one shift on how they could go about speaking up within their teams, what do you want that to be?
Practice out loud. How do I say this? And what do I say? And practice against the things you run up against most frequently. What are the things you're struggling with from a safety perspective? And then how do you say it in real time and who do you say it to? Because it is the muscle memory of understanding the risk isn't that high,
Right.
right? So I've got to get the risk of staying of speaking up lower than the risk of the need to the ease of staying silent. And
Right.
the only way to do that is to do it out loud, because then what you realize is it's way more effective than you could have imagined.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's
And
the safety, the
yeah.
psychologically safe place to practice it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably a good message as well for the younger workforce. Like I, mentioned my real world example earlier. And when, my son's asking questions, it's like, at this stage of my life, there's far fewer things I'm worried about. Like I don't care about looking like an idiot in front of other people because I've done it so many times that you realize that it's not life or death. So I think, yeah, practicing, especially if you're younger and new to the workforce, like getting over that first barrier, that first hesitation is probably really key.
Because you'll learn right then and there how psychologically safe it really is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
And to
right.
understand it as that, right? And I think that's also to know that you're learning out loud. And if the organization is true to we're going to learn and improve, that should be welcomed and congratulated as opposed to judged.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, obviously you do a lot of consulting, training, coaching. You've written on the topics extensively as well. So how can people find you? Where can they get some of your resources? We'll put it in the description as well so people
Sure.
can click over to your LinkedIn or your books on Amazon. But
Absolutely. So they can find my website is dramafreeworkforce.com. And you can email me direct. I'm at jen.long@own-up.com. And the book is called Own Up if you want to read about how I teach accountability. And I welcome, and I've got free information and resources on my website that you can download. So I encourage you to do it and reach out if you want more information.
yeah. Well, thanks so much. Really, really fun and interesting conversation today. Lots of takeaways, and definitely encourage people to reach out. Jen's super, obviously you can tell, but super approachable and super excited and passionate about sharing her frameworks and her knowledge with the safety community. So definitely encourage everybody to reach out. Like I said, we'll have your coordinates in the description, so there'll be no reason why people can't hit you
Don't
up
hold
on
back.
on
Don't stay
LinkedIn.
silent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Scott, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for including me on the pod.
Absolutely. My pleasure.